most people will never understand this job, what it takes to stay sharp, to make the call, to live with it after. Because when everything is on the line, there's no pause, and there's no second guess. And the truth is, nobody normal does this for a living. Welcome back to The Line and the Oath, real conversations about leadership, culture, and the people behind the job. Today we've got Tom Smith on, 30 years with the NYPD, from anti-crime and narcotics to gangs, major cases, and 17 years on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And this one's different, because when you've lived a career like that, you've seen parts of the job most people will never understand. So Tom, it's good to have you on.
But thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So take me back. When did this job first get real for you?
Yeah, when I was 8 years old. uh, to be honest, I mean, my dad was a NYPD detective for 26 years through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I just grew up around it. It was all I wanted to do. That was my focus. That was my drive. Even at that age, that's what I was going to do in that department. Uh, and I got that from my dad because if you drove through the city with him, we would go to a Yankee game. Every street was a story. Every neighborhood was a story. It was a history lesson driving through, either the Bronx or Manhattan with him. And it just fueled me more and more to finally get there. And then I did in 1990, finally got on the job.
At what age was that?
22.
22. I gotta take it back to you. Yankee fan?
Of course.
Oh, thank God. I have one, Brandon. We got a Yankee fan.
Oh, I feel so
had to
alone
put
tonight.
it. So
That's
where
okay.
did you start the career? What division were you in?
I was on patrol I got assigned to the 30th precinct, which was on the west side of Manhattan, west side of Harlem. And at the time in 1990 was one of the busiest precincts in the city. Uh, the entire city was just out of control with crime during that time. You had, 2,800 to 3,000 homicides in the city a year. You had about 115,000 robberies, 85,000 sexual assaults. It was insane what the city was like.
How
I
do you
mean,
keep up
just
with that?
it was, you just worked your butt off and you just learned the job really quick. I mean, just to put it in perspective, my precinct was 1 square mile. And in 90, I think it was 93 and 94, we had 88 homicides in 1 square mile in 1 year. That's just what it was. It was drugs. It was, drugs were still the biggest priority in the city at that time. Crack was still going on. Heroin was starting to, make its way back into the city, but crack and coke, especially where I worked up in Washington Heights and Harlem, were everything up there. So that fueled shootings and robberies and pushing robberies and home invasions and, a whole host of other crimes was all geared from the drug trade.
In doing this job, did you ever worry about taking the job home with you, fearing for your family's safety, people recognizing you out of uniform?
Well, where I live, I didn't live in a city, so it was easier for me to get out of there and go, north where I worked. So I didn't really think about it that much or worry about it. Because when you're dealing with people in the city usually just stay in the city. And I never actually ran into that situation before, so I didn't really have that on my mind, just going through the job.
So when things got like a little hairy, what type of things did you rely on?
Oh, you know what? A lot of it was on the job training. You learn a certain level and a certain amount in the academy, but then once you get out there, especially back then, in where we worked, you had no choice but to learn, and you had to learn quicker. You were gonna get hurt. Someone else was gonna get hurt because of just all the crime that was going on up there with everyone having guns and drugs and shootings and everything and fights and chasing people. You had to learn really fast. And, thankfully I did. Like I took to the job really quick and really easily. It was very easy for me to learn things. Probably again because I was just ready for it my whole life, and kind of waited for the opportunity. And when I did, I just took hold of it and wanted to make every opportunity a learning experience that was going to make me better going on with my career.
So after you started your career in patrol, you moved into narcotics?
No, I was in anti-crime first, which was a plainclothes unit within the precinct, uh,
Okay.
that you got recommended to go to. And in anti-crime, we were in plainclothes, we were in unmarked cars, and we dealt with all the robberies and robbery patterns and shots fired jobs and men with guns. So you were even elevated more into a little more dangerous situations, when you got in there. But being in anti-crime was a great time, man. That was a lot of fun. You were a small team. You had one sergeant. We had two different crime teams, so we worked opposite each other. But we only had like our crime team had four people and a sergeant, and that was your team, and it was awesome. I had a great time there. Plus, my sergeant was one of my best friends at the time, so that didn't help. That didn't
So,
hurt.
so bonds were pretty strong then.
Yes, very. Because you did. You relied on, you were in so many dangerous situations every day that, you became tight with your squad very, very quick. And you would go out after work and go get your wings and couple of beers, and all that. You would do that all the time because it was easier. It was easier to work alongside your friends than just, yeah, he's another cop on my squad. Uh, you relied on people more, when you were really looking out for each other because of that bond.
Absolutely.
So then you got into narcotics.
Then I went to narcotics, and I left Manhattan. I left Manhattan North and went to the Bronx because that's where one of the big initiatives were going on at the time. So it was a good move. I was glad I went to the Bronx, learned a different part of the city, uh, and get out there. And narcotics was again, other than JTTF, which was a totally separate part of the police department and my career, narcotics was the most fun I had in my career. That was the best place I worked. I had the best team. That's where I met my partner, who I still call my partner today, even though we haven't worked together in years. But we were in narcotics together, then we were in robbery squad together, and we're still friends to this day and talk to one another a lot. Uh, so learned a lot from him. He was in narcotics already for a while. Learned how to do narcotics investigations. Learned how to, never stop until you get the bad guy. Just don't stop. And anytime we were out running around all night chasing people or whatever, I would always blame him because I used to tell him, "Well, you told me to do this." So, uh, but narcotics was the best time. The cases we did, the search warrants, we did so many search warrants. And, you talk about a bond and trust when you're doing search warrants, that's the biggest trust you need, in a job. And I had to trust my team even more because I was the RAM guy. So I was hitting the door and being the first one in the door, and I had to rely on the guys behind me, taking care of whatever was in front of me. And they always did, which was great.
Now, if I read correctly, you had a pretty big case, 125 kilo
Yeah.
plus.
That was my partner. My partner started that case. It was his case. It was on our team, but Carl's was the case detective on it, who was, my partner. And it was a incredible case because we weren't a major case team. We weren't on the major case squad. We were just one of the regular teams that covered one of the precincts in the city, in the Bronx. And he got this source, and we started working them, and it led us to two different garages. Well, one garage and another parking garage in the Bronx, and a line into Venezuela, and we were able to get enough information on it to then go work with the DEA. Went up on a few international wires, and were able to track this one shipment coming from Venezuela into Miami through a tractor trailer up to the Bronx. And then we're able to move in, get the bad guys. I think we locked up like seven of them at the time, and then
Nice.
found the 125 kilos of coke that were delivered. and that was the largest. It still might be. I know someone had told me it was the largest seizure from a Bronx narcotics team ever.
How
Still
long
to
did
this
it
day?
take from
Yeah, I think it
start to
is.
finish to kinda crack that?
We worked that. That's a great question. Let me just rewind my brain a little bit because it was funny because I had a case going on at the time, uh, a big heroin case that took up like 3 blocks of an area that my team, again, the same team was running that, and we actually had to take that down a little earlier than we wanted to because Carlos's case was taken off, and we really had to get on top of it. So we actually took mine down maybe a few weeks ahead of time, uh, in order to start his up, and ours was successful too. You know, we did a ton of warrants and locked up a lot of people. Uh, I would say it was close to a year, probably close to a year.
So, with investigations like that, what makes a good investigator to a great investigator?
Ooh, wow. That's a great question. You know what it is? It's relying on others. It's a team concept, you know, and we had a great team of who's got a good suggestion. Where do you think we should go with this? Who's willing to go sit in a van for 12 hours, you know, watching the front of a garage? You know, so I think collectively greatness comes from teamwork. Greatness comes from taking your ego and putting it in a drawer, you know, and just relying on your team to get to the finish line. You know, it's okay to suggest things and want to do things. And Carlos did that. Hey, we need to do it this way, and we did. But I think the greatness comes from everyone being on the same page with one mission.
So, you worked this for a year, and there's obviously surveillance, were there any informants involved in this? Like, where's your intel coming from?
Yeah,
As much as you can say, anyway.
we had one main source that we dealt with, but then we were up on a lot of phones, a lot of facilities, you know, that were then fueling all the intel we were getting as well.
I'm so
That's
fascinated right now. This is you're our first like law enforcement guy that we've interviewed, and I'm
we're
kind of
both
in
sitting
awe.
here like, "And what happened next?"
I want to hear some of the gang cases you did.
Mhm.
Well, we did one, two main ones that we did, and it's funny, you know, we'll probably hit on it later. You know, our show, my partner Dan, in the middle of that one is how I met Dan. That's how we met in
Okay.
1999. I was going after the head of the Nietas street gang. Now, the Nietas was a kind of arm of the Latin Kings. They were an enforcement arm of the Latin Kings. So, if the Latin Kings had any contracts they wanted done, they would hire the Nietas. So, I wanted the head of that gang, and his name was Santana. And we knew he was a bad guy. We knew he was into a lot of stuff, but we couldn't get him, and no one would give him up. So that was a bit of an annoying. And then one day we got lucky. We hit a warrant. We hit a search warrant that had nothing to do with anything. And as we were talking to the guy we locked up, he mentions where he got all his drugs, and he mentions this guy Santana. So I almost fell over. I'm like, "Whoa, who'd you get this from?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know if you know that's his name." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I know what his name is. Where'd you get it?" He laid out everything about how he got it, the apartment, what was in the apartment, where it was, this whole everything. So that was, you know, like the 4th of July for us. That was the best thing in the world. So we grab him, we go down, we swear out a warrant, and we get ready to do the warrant one particular day. So I get into the office early, and who's standing in the middle of our office but our new sergeant, Dan Murphy. And, you know, one thing about the NYPD, we don't really love change. We really don't. No matter, you know, it'll work out that you're a good guy, but initially we do not like it. So you can imagine when I walked into the office and this stranger standing there, and I went, like, "Hi." He's like, hey, Dan Murphy, how are you?" Same personality you hear on the show every week. Same exact personality. So I go, "Hey, how you doing? Good. All right, let's go." He goes, "Where are we going?" "We're doing a warrant. Let's go. I'll tell you in the car." And he's like, "Okay." He's putting his bags down. "Let's go." So we get in the car and we go, and emergency service actually ended up hitting the warrant because of the amount of weapons that were in there. So they end up hitting the warrant, but Santana's not in the apartment. So we recover a absolute arsenal of weapons and drugs and everything, scanners, bulletproof vests, everything you can imagine was in this place. But he's not there. So now we do a press conference and put his picture up, and he's running with his cousin. So we put his picture up, and our inspector's like, "Okay, now go get him." And we spent the next 3 days uh, trying to get him, and then finally got in touch with him through a phone number we got from an old girlfriend. Got him on the phone and got him to turn himself in. Him and his partner. So we met him at one of the precincts like 3 in the morning. Uh, one night and ended up locking him up. So that was my introduction to Dan Murphy, and we ended up locking up that guy, uh, which was great because we really wanted him. And then, not as large of a story because it would take way too long. We did a federal RICO case on the head of the East Coast Bloods, OG Mac. He was the head of the Bloods on the entire East Coast, and we ended up doing a federal case with the FBI, and ended up locking him and his entire crew up. And OG Mac right now is in uh, the Supermax federal facility in Florence, Colorado for the rest of his life.
Wow, that's incredible. That's just
So
it's truly incredible. Do you notice a difference? Okay, I mean, you're retired now, but do you notice a difference between criminals then to criminals now?
it's hard to say that because the last, and we'll get into it and you'll understand why in probably a little while. The last 17 years of dealing on the terrorism level is completely different than a street guy. So for me to answer that the criminals have changed, I really don't know, because when we were in the task force and dealing, everything after 9/11, we were so removed from the daily NYPD stuff. We just weren't involved in it. It wasn't that type of work. It wasn't that type of cases. They are much more involved, much more, uh, much bigger, much more to it. So I don't know if the criminals are different today. I think the problem with the criminals today, or the criminal justice system today, is the bad guys today get chance after chance after chance after chance, and they know that. Back when we were
Mhm.
on the street, they were terrified to get locked up because they know they were staying in. So uh, their attitude is different today because of the rules, because of what they're able to get away with, because of these district attorneys that are in our country that just let them out and let them do whatever they do and then get out and then do it again and then get out and then kill someone. Shocking, and then everyone gets twisted over that. Like, no kidding. That's how it's done. That's what happens. Where back when we worked, they knew they were staying in jail. So I guess, to answer your question, back back when I worked, they were more worried about us than they are today.
So, with that being said, do you think officers now don't try as hard? I'm trying to word it correctly. Do
I
they
was gonna
not care
ask,
as
do you
much,
think
or
it's
they're
harder to do the job today versus,
there you go.
Yes. Yeah.
30 years ago?
Much harder because because of a lot of things. One, you're fighting an uphill battle with elected DAs and judges who don't live in our shoes, don't understand the job, don't know what it entails, don't know the day. They could sit up behind, a podium and in front of cameras all they want and say, yeah, you understand where you're coming from. They have no idea. They have no clue what it takes to do this, and they take us for granted. I keep saying us, but it's just easier to say it that way. Uh, they take it for granted, and they don't think about what is going on the cop side. They're more worried about, the criminal. But you got that, and you got, these phones and cameras and videos that are getting put in the faces of cops while they're in a fight. It blows my mind what goes on. But I think on the same token, to answer your question, Brandon, I think the cops are covered a little more today because of the advent of body cams. I think body cams did an exceptional uh, service to police officers rather than it being a disservice. I think it showed everyone how quick things happen, how in the past the media twisted certain videos, to show what they wanted to show. And I think, the body cams really helped out law enforcement in the last few years.
So, was the gang stuff part of your detective career? Or was that after?
No, that was part of it. I got promoted to detective when I was in narcotics. Uh,
Okay.
in '97, I got
So how
promoted
long
to det
were you a detective for?
24 years.
24 years. How do you mentally bounce from like case to case with that kind of weight?
It was just what it was. I enjoyed it. I loved the cases that were a mess. That were just a headache. A puzzle or, my God, we got all these guys all over the place. How are we going to put them in one spot? Okay, cool. I'll do that. And Carlos was the same way. That's why we got along so well, and what we did together. With the numbers that we got in cases that we did because we were the same. It was like the bigger the mess, the more fun it was. Uh, and we had some good results. We had a
So
good time.
maybe a dumb question here, but were you, as a detective, were you working one case at a time, or do you have multiple on your desk at any given time?
Well, it depends where we were. It depends where we were and what the level of the case was. When we had the case that we got the 125 keys, that was the only case we were doing because we had to work with the DEA, so we really couldn't do anything else. When you're in a detective squad, like you see in Barney Miller or NYPD Blue, you can carry 50 cases at a time with no problem. I mean, just a stack of cases on your desk, and all right, which one am I going to do today? When Carlos and I were in the robbery squad together, you had multiple cases at the same time that you would go through.
How do
That's
you like
that's
how do you turn that off whenever you go home at the end of the day?
It was a great car ride home, and I would decompress on the ride home. I would, put the radio on, put a Yankee game on, depending on what time it was. Open a window if it was nice out and just kind of cruise, get it out of your mind. It helped, if we had a really bad night or something really bad happened, I give, my wife all the credit on planet Earth for me being level-headed and still in one piece, mentally as anyone because I would get home and she'd look at me and just go, what's wrong? And we would talk about it, talk it out, get it off, my chest, and then go to bed. And I never really held on to too much. I just tried to get it out of my head. Yeah, did that always work? No, I don't mean that one bit. Uh, but I just tried. That was my plan with doing that because I used to see, and you saw it later, holding on to it and keeping it inside you was the worst thing in the world. And when I see guys do that, that's when really bad things happened in their lives.
I think it was on the previous episode we did. For me personally, just to talk about it, like I don't need answers back. I just want you to hear me. That helps me more than anything.
Right. Absolutely. And it's just getting it out. It's just, telling a story. This is what we did. This is what happened. There were so many nights. I mean, even, back on patrol, when literally you were doing something every single night. You were in a fight, you were chasing someone got shot, someone got stabbed, someone got robbed. I mean, that was every single night you were at work. Uh, and it just, it was just a switch I had and was able to do it. And thank God for it. I don't know. I don't have a magic equation of how I did it. I just, okay, today's over. Go to sleep, wake up, tomorrow's another day. I'm gonna have to be in a right mind the next day because we're gonna do the same thing all over again. So you can't compound it each and every night. It was just, okay, tonight's over. Put it away, put it in the drawer, turn the page, whatever you want to say. Tomorrow's another day. Just go out and do it again.
So I'm gonna pry a little bit here. So you mentioned your wife was the catalyst for support for the duration of your career, right?
Yep.
Was she relieved whenever you decided to retire?
You know what? It's a great question. And no, yeah, when I made the decision, it was like, really? Like, all right. She understood, and here's why, Brandon. Here's the way I'll answer it. We had met before I got on the NYPD, and she knew what my dad did. She knew what I was gonna do, and she also knew me and how I was going to be. And then once I got into it, she saw what I did, and she accepted it. I mean, she took it head on, man, and never, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" She never questioned what I was doing. There were a couple of times like, "Hey, you alright? Make sure you're okay doing A, B, and C." But she never questioned what I was doing. Like, "Why do you have to do that? Why are you doing that?" That never came out of her mouth, which made my job easier because that was something I didn't have to worry about or think about. And, she wrote it to the last freaking day, man. And she went through a lot, when being in JTTF, when I was traveling around the world, she was, she became sort of a single mom, for a while, and 3 kids and going in 3 directions and making sure they're at softball games and baseball games and dance and all that, for a lot of time. Uh, and, I owe her a drink at some point in our lives.
Hmm. That's actually a fantastic segue. So you go into the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and you go from being an NYPD cop to being essentially a federal law enforcement officer, right?
Yeah. Uh, After 9/11, uh, Dan and I both, it's again, we were together in the gang team. Then he had a great opportunity to go to a different unit. I went back and worked with Carlos in a robbery squad, and then 9/11 happened. Uh, and then Dan and I both got asked separately by different people to come down and be part of the task force. And we would stay in touch with them. We talked to each other all the time. I mean, I think I actually talked to him on the 11th, like, and it was probably a 30-second phone call, like, "Hey, where are you? I'm here. You good? You good? Okay, I'll talk to you later." Uh, and then we found out a few days later, a month, a couple of weeks later, whatever, that we both were asked to go down. And then once we got down there, I was on his team again. He was my sergeant on the squad, I was working on. And but you're right. It was completely different rules, different tempo, different cases, different authority. Uh, which, you're not responsible for 5 boroughs anymore. You're responsible for the world blowing up. So, and you had to make sure, and our attitude was making sure 9/11 never happened again. So we had that weight on us to make sure, we didn't slip up or goof up, and that's how you got asked to go down there. You had to be involved in a lot of high profile cases that were, the results were good, and that's how you got asked to go down there. And the thing was, I never made it out to be any different than just another case. I never took this stance, "Oh my god, this guy wants to do A, B, and C." It was just it was a case. How would you run a case in narcotics if it was this guy? Okay, that's how we did it. Don't make too much of it. The priority is there, obviously, but mentally, just do the A, Bs, and Cs that had been working your whole career, and you'll be okay. But it was really different going down there for sure.
What was the level difference between that and working the streets?
Well, it was longer. I mean, you're not, "Okay, there's a bad guy, let's do this, go get him." No, no, no. You ran cases for months and years down there, and for good reason, because when you're at that level, you had to make sure you took your time and the right things were done and you used the right resources that were helping you do a case with other government agencies that could help out, because you didn't want to get, it was never really one person. It was always a group. So, all right, who's that person affiliated with? And who are they affiliated with? And who are they affiliated with? So you would start off like a chart with 3 or 4 people, then in a month it'd be 40, and then overseas here and overseas there and that country, and it would just that's how it worked. You weren't really, not that you weren't worried about one person, but there was always more to it than just the one person you
Mm.
might have been looking at. But that was the biggest difference, was the time frame that you worked a case.
How many countries did you travel to while you were doing JTTF?
I think it was 17 or 18.
Are you allowed to talk about some of the moments you did working it?
There's ones I can talk about. There's some I can't. And there's some operational stuff. Obviously, I can't get into. How we did certain things, but yeah, it was. I don't know if you heard me. I think it was 17 or 18 countries that I've been to. Which, again, when you think about what we do in the NYPD, if you go to Jersey for the day, that's a great day. That's awesome. Like a road trip to Jersey for the day. That's a great day. So then when you get into traveling around the world, and going to other countries and dealing with different security agencies and heads of state of those countries and ambassadors and so forth, you get put into a different kind of mindset. But, you know, the biggest thing that I had an advantage of with doing this was, and I tell kids when I go and speak in colleges or high schools or down in the police academy, that the biggest thing you can teach yourself is your communication skills. You can go to the range, you can learn how to drive, you can take martial arts, you can do all that, work out like a crazy person. That's all great and needed. But if you can't talk to people and represent yourself, then you're not going to be successful. You're not. And I tell kids that all the time. What can I do? What can I do? Learn how to talk to people, especially this generation, because they don't
Yeah.
talk to people. Uh, you need to, and I've said, use this example. You need to be able to talk to the crackhead on the corner who might be a couple of days away from dying and talk to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's what you need to do to be successful. Uh, and here's why, because you never know what tomorrow is going to be. I never thought I'd be in JTTF. I would have been happy as hell being in Bronx homicide, being a homicide detective for my career. That was actually my goal. That's what I wanted to do. That was all I wanted to do. So, events happen in this world that change your life, that change your career, and that's what happened to me. So you have to be ready for that. And you have to be ready to be put on a world stage and a different level in the police department, especially like the NYPD, because like I'm an example of it. Your career and where you're at can change in a millisecond. Did I ever think I'd be in another country briefing an ambassador on a case? No. Or sitting in a room with representatives from the White House or the Pentagon or the agency or whatever? No. But you have to be ready for that.
Do you have any tips for the younger
That's good
generation
advice.
how to fix their communication skills?
You know what? Yeah, watch guys who've done it. Shut your mouth and watch and listen and just be guided by them and take little things. Don't act like someone else, but take little things that you like someone did and then make it your own. And I tell people, kids that all the time. And they ask that, well, how do I do that? Be quiet and listen, and just listen and watch how certain things are done. You don't always have to say something to learn. Just watch and listen and then make it your own. Uh, and strategies become your own as well, and then it becomes fun. I just gave this whole thing last week on, I was talking to a college, class and talking about interrogations and interviews and stuff. And, they asked me like, well, is the good guy, bad guy thing, is that real and good cop, bad cop and all that? I said, well, it can be, that's a strategy. But one of the things that I did that I was successful doing, and, Tony, you brought it up in initially when we started. You asked me, are you a Yankee fan? It's the first thing I would ask a perp when I walked in a room. Because he could be in there for, we want him for a double homicide, and I'll walk in there and talk to him about sports for a half hour before I
Mhm.
even talk
Get him
about
comfortable.
what's going on, and that was my first question all time, Yankee and Met fan. Because if you say Met fan, dude, we're gonna have a problem.
Dude, my wife's a Met fan.
So, that's what I mean. I taught that myself, what was going to make the bad guy comfortable and make me comfortable into getting what I want and getting information that I need. And it's all about making that person comfortable. But if you don't know how to initially talk to people, you're not going to be able to do that.
Very good advice. So let's fast forward to something I've been dying to hear about. Um, you helped thwart a planned school shooting. Never happened. How close was it?
I think it ended up being about 4 days away when we stopped it. That's one of those I can, kind of give you the outskirts of it, but not the, how we did certain things. But, we got information that this kid was planning. Uh, he was throwing out the what if questions, on a group chat. What if someone shot the school up? What if someone left a note? What if this or what if that? And one of those kids thought enough of it to take screenshots of all the conversations and brought it to the local guys, and then the local guys brought it to us, uh, and just said, "Hey, this, maybe you guys can help with this with the resources that you have." And we ended up, not taking it from them, but we kind of took the lead on it because of just what we were able to do. And it was in a high school that I knew, really knew. My kids actually were still going there at the
Wow.
time of all this. I knew the principal, I knew all the teachers, I knew everyone there. And, we knew who the bad guy was. It was just a matter of getting enough evidence to lock him up. And we eventually did, and ended up locking him up a few days before. We knew through the investigative process and talking to people that the last day of school was going to be the target. And that was about 4 days away when we ended up locking them up. And we found like the hit list. We found the diagram of the classroom, that it was going to happen in, and all that. And, getting back to communication skills, he's in the back of a car. You're looking around, and we had FBI, NYPD, helicopters, bomb squad, canines all around his house. Uh, so he's looking at that and he's flipping out, and he's nervous and all that. And he had just come back from a basketball tournament because he played basketball on a team. And I opened the back of the radio car where he was sitting and he's handcuffed. And I went, "Hey, how'd the tournament go?" And he looked at me like I had 20 heads. He's like, "Huh?" I said, how'd you do in the tournament? How'd you do? Who'd you play? How many points you score? Who's your leading scorer? Who's your big rebounder? I went on for a half hour. And then he calmed down, and I saw, like, you see, like, his shoulders just, like, drop. And sure as hell, he goes, "You wanna know how I was gonna do it?" "Sure, dude. Absolutely." And, then we got that statement from him. So, uh, the communication part of it came back.
That's
I guess my
nuts.
question here, that's a lot of resources, a lot of man hours, a lot of money going into a threat. What was kind of the catalyst? What made you know this wasn't just some punk kid talking?
Once we started the case and got into his background, we knew that was a problem. What we were seeing, what we were hearing, more what we were seeing. We knew this wasn't just, a veiled threat or just some idiot playing around. We just knew it wasn't. And me and my partner didn't sleep, really sleep for probably a good week, at least 3 or 4 days of all night, go home, sleep for, a little while, eat, come back, do it again. And then the night we locked him up, I think I went home and changed and went back. So we were beat after, once we locked him up. But that's what you do. You just, you put it on autopilot. You don't think about, oh my God, I got to home and sleep. No, that's out the window, especially with something like this. So it was just one of those things that you didn't care how tired you were if you didn't eat. We just had to get it done.
Now, you also had a case in Afghanistan, a kidnapping. You allowed to talk about that one?
Yeah, a little bit, not a lot, but a little. a Yeah, I was assigned to a case of a reporter had gotten grabbed in Afghanistan, and it became my case and one of the other guys. And there was a series of things we had to do once we got the case assigned to it. We got asked, hey, and I was actually running a big, larger case at the time that I had to put kind of on hold for a while because of this. This was a priority for obvious reasons. And, me and my partner split up a little bit. He did one thing, I was doing another just to collectively get it done. And then at a point in time, I went to Afghanistan for 3 months doing his case and got hooked up with, a special ops team that was up in Bagram, traveled around Afghanistan, down to Kandahar, and just the work there was incredible. Not physically, mentally. I mean, like I said before, if you went to Jersey for a day, it was cool. Now I'm in the middle of a war zone. I'm not in the military. I'm a cop, and I have to now be armed like I'm in the military and have a military, outlook and mentality of going out when we went out and driving around armor plated cars and driving a certain way and being on point and watching out for snipers and suicide bombers and all that way you're driving around, going from just point A to point B and then back to the embassy. So it was draining at times because of just the stress level of it. Uh, and then on top of that, you had to put that to the side and try to find the guy. And, at a point in time, thankfully, it all worked out and we got him out.
So, how was how do I say, the reception from the military guys? Did they know why NYPD was there? Was there any kind of type of like friction with you not being military? Were you like pretty
No,
accepted pretty easily?
it was, you know what? Just the complete opposite. You have these guys who are just, you know, kind of fictional characters that you hear about all the time, these mythical figures in the military. And then once you like talk to them and you're like, yeah, I'm an NYPD detective, then it switches. Oh my God, you are? Oh, tell me about that. You're like, really? Like, I don't you understand what you do? You're like the New York Yankees to me, and you're asking about me. Uh, and they were so into, what I did. And that was the funny part of it. They just looked upon what I did as harder than stuff they were doing. Oh, you guys got to do that every day. We just do it every once in a while. I'm like, bro, no, this it's not the same. But no, there was none whatsoever of why you here, or even from the other agencies that we were dealing with there. No one ever did that. But again, here's why. You have to represent at the highest level who you are. The NYPD, again, not But just being truthful about it, the NYPD and the NYPD detective is revered around this world because they see it on TV, they see it in, movies and all this, and then one standing in front of you, and you have to take that responsibility of being on your game, man. You can't walk into a meeting of a room filled with big time people and go, "Oh, I don't know. Well, let me find out." You can't do that. You have to be on point with every single thing you do, especially something like that, because it was being briefed to the highest levels. And, if you make a mistake and say something wrong and policy gets developed, you never want to be in the middle of that. So you had to be just really on your game with doing that. And I embraced that. I took that responsibility serious because I wanted to represent the NYPD the best way I can, because what you do is going to set forth what the next guy has to do. You screw up and you suck, regardless of who the next guy that come in, he's gonna, they're gonna think of him as you. You know, uh, it's just gonna roll like that. But if you put everything out there and do a great job, then the next guy, they're gonna be like, okay, hey, they know what they're doing. Uh, and that's what I tried to do all the time.
So, life now, retirement. You're kind of
So
doing the
let me
same work,
let me
but
let me chime in. I got one more quick question before going to that.
all right, go ahead.
Tom, is it a fair statement to say that you have worked your dream career?
No doubt about it. Oh God, yeah. Even exceeded it. Like I said, I would have been, if I did, homicides in the Bronx or whatever, I would have been on top of the world. And then to do what I ended up doing and other things I ended up doing, uh, far exceeded what I ever thought, by far. I mean, it's a great question, but way out kind of outkick my pass coverage, or however you want to say it. But I would do it again tomorrow. I had such a great time with the job and going in and being at that level, and adrenaline junkie, whatever you want to call it. Uh, I loved that whole part of it, especially if you would, man. If we knew there was a bad guy and he was out there and we had to find him, oh, that was the best thing in the world. I used to get yelled at by my Carlos used to yell at me all the time, because if I got in that groove of, we know you did it, now we got to find you. I wouldn't go home. I wouldn't sleep. I wouldn't eat. And he'd be like, "Yo, T, it's like midnight. Can we eat, bro? Please." I'm like, "All right, fine. Just eat something quick." Danny did the same thing though. Danny would yell at me too, because I would get like that. But it was just a passion. It was just a passion I had.
It's hard. A lot of people in our life, first responder lives, it's a lot. Everybody has a passion like that. I can, me, fortunately, I could say I have that passion for the EMS side of things.
Hmm.
I'm
I
sure
think it
Brandon could say the
transitions. It
same.
goes from being a job to being most of who you are.
But yeah, it's your personality. It's everything about you. Uh, and I agree with that totally. It just becomes part of your life. And I tell young detectives that when I go into the criminal investigation course, which is like a 3-week course new detectives take, or people that are going to be promoted have to take. And I tell them all the time, you know, you can't like this job. You have to love it. You can't like it. If you like it, you're not going to enjoy it, and you're not going to be good at it. If you love it, you will perform and be successful at it, but you have to love it.
How long have you been retired now?
Since 2020, 6 years.
How hard was the transition?
It was, you know what? It wasn't that bad. It was weird, but here's why it was different, because I retired a week before COVID took over the world. I retired on March 6th, 2020. So there wasn't anything to do because you couldn't do anything. So, I couldn't do anything. There was no one was, no one was getting a job. No one was going anywhere. You weren't going on vacation. You weren't, you just couldn't do anything. So the transition was probably easier than it would have been if the world was normal at that time. But even with that, Brandon, I tell people all the time, retiring after 30 years is like walking forward for 30 years and then someone telling you have to walk backwards. Like you'll stumble, you'll fall, but you'll eventually get it and you'll eventually walk fine. And that's pretty much what retiring to me was like.
So with the retirement, you're kind of doing the same stuff. Can we talk about your podcast and the media events you've been to? Trying to educate the younger generation.
No, we can't talk about it. No, I'm only kidding. uh, yeah, Dan Murphy, my partner and sergeant who I mentioned a couple of times tonight, him and I started a podcast 4 years ago now called Gold Shields. And what we did was the premise of it was me and him getting together and saying, you know what, there's so many great stories out there from law enforcement, from the military that people just don't know the backstory of certain things. They may know an event or a case, but not the entirety of the backstage part of it. And we said if we had enough resources, Dan and I both, knew a lot of people. Let's get these guests on who are involved in these big cases and big investigations and so on and so forth and get them to tell their story about it. And that's what we ended up doing. And just we get blown away by the guests that we have. I mean, we shake our head a lot of who's in our like inner circle now and who's our friends, of guests that we've had or stories that we've talked about. And eye-opening, when we don't know a lot of what we have guests on for. And what I mean by that is, if I'm doing a lot of the booking and scheduling, I'll know why I want a certain guest on because of whatever. And in the middle of, talking to whoever it is in between that, they'll start telling me about the story and I shut them down. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me until the show. They're like, well, don't you want to know? I don't want to know right now because we want our reactions to be authentic. And if you see us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and Dan and I are quiet and blown away by something, that is 100% legit because it's something we hadn't heard, or we don't know what to say, or we just shake our head. None of that's made up. That stuff we are hearing for the first time when someone says it. And we intentionally do that because it's just better. It makes for a better interview, instead of just having 1,000 notes in front of you and questions and all that. And we don't have a script to the show. There's no script. We're doing what we do, just whatever pops into your head about the topic, we ask them and guests love that when it's not structured. It's just, hey, because you get more information and you have a couple of extra laughs, when you can, depending on the topic. But, it's just, it's a blessing what we get to do and the people that we get to do it with. And we just have a blast with it. And it's going good. It's our 4th year. We just released our 158th show, which
Already watched it.
you know, with the true crime garage guys.
Right at the beginning, they're harping on each other.
Oh my God, they were great. This week, and then I look at like the calendar of who we got coming up. I'm like, my God, the stories are just so great. And we're blessed. We just are. It was an idea. It was a thought. It was hey, let's see how this works. And oof, here you are 4 years later, still doing it, which, and no one laughs at Dan and I more than Dan and I. There's no one that laughs more at ourselves than we do about where we're at, but it's a lot of fun.
What's the name of your show? Because I don't even think we've said it.
It's called Gold Shields. And we're on every audio platform you can think of. There's some that I don't even know we're on, which is kind of funny when I get emails like, hey, you hit this spot. You're like, okay, cool, thanks. That we don't even know we're on because they just give them to other platforms. And then we have our YouTube channel at Gold Shields. So, it's and Instagram and, we're all on that. It's just a blast. I mean, I just have so much fun doing it. It's a lot more work than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, when and you guys know, when we started it, we're like, "Oh, once a week? Cool, we could do that." That's literally 90% of my day is dealing with the show. Who's next? Who do we got coming up? And then life, sometimes life gets in the way, people get sick and people, or things happen in people's lives, which, you know, happen, so getting a call the day you're supposed to do a show, go, oh my God, I got the flu. You're like, okay, what are we going to do? Move on, come
Mhm.
up with another idea. Uh, you just deal with that, because people, human beings and things happen. And you just kind of got to roll with it, which we've gotten better at over the year. I remember when it first happened, you're like, oh my God, what, the schedule's going to get all screwed up. And then you just think more about it like, no, we're good. We'll be all right.
I could definitely say I enjoy doing it, even though if it takes a big portion of my day every day because you have to make the clips and show people stuff. I enjoy doing it. I think I text Brandon once or twice a day about it. We will have scheduling issues because we just have busy lives. I'm traveling everywhere. He's now traveling everywhere. So there might be a week where we don't put something out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, we've come across that. Where we just did last week. One of our guests we had, woke up that morning and had the flu. Okay, what are we gonna do? We'll figure something out, put something else out, or delay the other show by a couple of days so it covers that week. There's all things you can do. But my wife always reminds me. It's like, all right, you're not ABC, you're not five, you're it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be the same exact time every single week. I'm like, yeah, that's true. You're right. Uh, but I'm with you, Tony. We just have a blast doing it. It is so much fun. And Dan and I, it's not even just, we're friends. We've been friends for 25 years. So it's, you have that, you're doing it with one of your best friends, which makes it even more fun. Uh, when the show's going on.
What's weird is me and Brandon became good friends because of the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Mhm. But
Yeah.
that's good. That's
Like,
good because it has to.
we met through that foundation we were a part of that we're not there anymore. We just became friends, and this just it got fun. Um,
Mhm.
our hope was always make it entertaining. We didn't wanna be educational. There's enough people out there that want to be educational. Cool. That's not us. We wanna be a bunch of buddies at a bar telling stories.
Mhm. Right.
Through all of it, through the rebrand, and now really getting to kinda cut loose with it and have a lot of fun without any handcuffs whatsoever. It's just fun. This is the best part of the week for me.
Yeah.
This is very therapeutic. I hope that 4 years in and 158 episodes in, it's still just as fun.
Yeah, and you know what? You got the right attitude. Just have fun. And Dan and I said, when we stop having fun, we're gonna stop doing it. Because you can't force yourself to do this, nor should you. uh, with the people that are in front of you and the guests that you have and the stories that you're hearing. If you're forcing yourself to do it, then stop. And we always said that. And it's just each week or each month, when we got this coming up this month, and you're like, wow, that's going to be a great show, or can't wait to talk to that person, or when I call Dan and like, hey, guess who I got? We got this coming up in May, whenever it might be, or we have a live show that we're going to do. We got asked to do this. Uh, those are great conversations we have, and it just makes it more fun.
I couldn't agree more with that. I didn't think I would have as much fun as I do doing this, but I look forward to these conversations every week.
Yeah,
Meet incredible
listen,
people.
yeah, listen. When in my lifetime, all right, before this crazy podcast started, could I ever tell you that I am very close and good friends with Chris Kyle's family? I mean,
That's
who would
crazy.
when would I ever think that? I'm gonna see the whole family next week, down in Texas. That I picked the phone up and text Taya Kyle. Hey, what's up, Tay? How you doing? Yeah, everything's good, Tom. Talk to you soon. Who would think I would do that? when you have, that and just I mean, that's one example. I can go on and on with people who are friends of ours now, but just to point them out, and they're the best people in the world. That's the other thing. It's not even a work, to be friends with them. So, they're great people and great family, that we know, and we're blessed to know them and have them part of the show.
That's awesome.
I guess I don't want to, but we do have to come to a close. This resonated with you guys. Like, comment, share, follow us on our platforms. This is the Line in the Oath with Brandon and Tony. You guys have a good day, night. See you guys later.